Welcome to another episode of Break the Silence, Build the Future. I'm your host, Fartumo Kusow. Over the next few weeks, we are entering a different rhythm on this podcast. One that moves intentionally, one that prepares us for something both personal and collective. But before we talk about awareness, justice, or advocacy, before we talk about the ribbons, walks, or campaigns, I need to begin here. I need to start with you and share with you the start. I want you to know what started it, how this entire movement started with a weight. This is a story about grief, but not the kind of grief that's quiet or private. This is a grief that refuses to stay still, a grief that asked me to build something with it. When you lose someone you love, especially a child, to violence, that grief, I found out, doesn't arrive like a whisper. It shatters. It storms through your life and tears away everything that used to feel certain. Nothing is certain anymore. Nothing is clear anymore. Nothing is as it used to be or as it should have been. I lost my daughter Sahra to intimate partner violence in May of 2023. And with that one act, with that one sentence, the world I knew ended. I remember the sentence that changed everything. The knock at the door, the cold air in my lungs. Your daughter's husband has been arrested and charged with the first degree of her murder. There are no instructions for how to hear those words. There are no plans of how to digest those words. No handbook for how to keep breathing when your child is gone. Grief came like a flood, and I could have stayed there. Wanted to stay there, felt that was the only place I belonged, drowning. And some days I did. Some days I stayed there, let the grief come at me, drowning me to the point I couldn't breathe. But think about this grief, this one I had experienced and I'm still experiencing is, it didn't just ache, it didn't just hurt, it didn't just shatter me. It demanded something of me, something I didn't know I could bring up, something I didn't know I had in me. It said to me, you cannot let this be the end. You cannot let your daughter's legacy be defined that one sentence. You cannot let silence be the last word. For Sahra, for thousands of other women who are taken and never remembered, never spoken about. But what I know for certain, what I want to share with you for certain, I did not choose this mission. Grief handed it to me. And I had no choice but to say yes. If you have ever loved someone and lost them, especially under violent, unjust, or preventable circumstances, you may know this feeling, the strange transformation when pain becomes a kind of canvas, when the love you can't give them anymore turns into action, when silence, keeping quiet, going along with the status quo becomes impossible. That's the kind of grief I'm talking about. The grief that demands more. It doesn't ask, it doesn't request, it doesn't plead or beg, it demands it. This episode is one of 5-part series that would lead us to a campaign I've been holding close to my heart, a public intervention, a collective remembrance, a refusal to look away. But before we get there, before we approach it, before we start and do the work that must be done, I want to honor the root of it. I want to share with you the source of that grief and the reason for this mission. Because grief is not weakness, it's evidence of how deeply we have loved. And sometimes that love, when the person you were directing it is no more, needs somewhere to go. That's why this Sahra Foundation exists. That's why this podcast exists. That's why the work we're about to do together matters. Maybe you have been carrying grief like mine. Maybe it's quieter, maybe it's older, maybe it still surprises you at random hours of the day. Wherever you are in that journey, you are not alone. And this episode is not a call to be strong. It's an invitation to be honest, to let grief have its seat at the table. Then ask it as gently, as calmly, as collectively as you can. Now what? Ask that question. Don't only ask the question, but be willing to listen. Not only be willing to listen, but be willing to hear it. Next episode will explore the silence around us, the silence of the system, the silence of friends, silence of co-workers, the silence of the neighbors, silence of institutions that look the other way. But for today, just this. If your grief has asked something of you, listen. It might be pointing you towards something that matters. Thank you for being here with me, and thank you for carrying this with care. We begin again. Until next week, take care of yourself and accept the words of your grief. Until next week, for another episode of Break the Silence, Build the Future, I will leave you with that. Thank you for joining me.